Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Gordon Glenister, and I'm delighted to be sharing with you the impact of COVID-19 on membership bodies, trade associations, and charities. Before we go on, a little bit about myself. I'm a membership consultant, former Director General of a trade association, and the founder of BCMA Influence, which is a trade association for the influencer marketing industry. I'm also a podcast presenter, and my new website, membershipworld.co.uk, you'll be able to see a copy of this report, which you can download afterwards. So a little bit about the survey that we conducted. We sent it to 700 leading industry professionals, and I conducted around 30 interviews with chief execs from trade bodies, membership organisations, and charities. Yeah, some very interesting findings, which we will talk about now. This is what we looked at. The level of support that came out from government and what people's reaction to that was, how they were lobbying and what format that took, the impact on memberships and communications. Of course, there was a huge change to the events industry, but quite an interest in more involvement and engagement with education. Then we looked at safety and social distancing measures that some organisations were putting into place. And obviously there's been a huge change in the impact of the working environment, and we looked at a number of areas there. And then lastly, to finish, what the future may look like. So a bit like a crystal ball really, but certainly some interesting analysis that came from it. So to start with then, if we look at the government support, so 45% of the respondents said that they used the government furlough for some of their employees. I guess it was a bit of a challenge in many instances, of course, because never before has trade associations, membership bodies and charities services been more in use. It was a bit like a perfect storm. In fact, particularly for the charity sector, because many of those very vulnerable services were being used considerably, and yet their traditional way of raising and generating money had all been stopped, whether they be events, whether they be volunteers, all sorts of things. And on top of that, of course, then everybody was supporting the NHS charities. So that caused considerable concern. So in terms of charities, there was around 750 million made available. But I know the sector was bidding and asking for like 4 billion, so it was quite a long way short of that. But there were lots of really positive reactions as well, though, to the grants, particularly for retail establishments, the hospitality industry, and obviously for the self-employed, which went down very well. We also saw a lot of really good collaborative efforts made by trade associations, often combining together, because clearly the government couldn't take on representation from thousands of trade associations and charities all in one go. So things like, for example, the Advertising Association, that has a regular dialogue and communication into government, was having weekly meetings. What they were saying to me is that in some instances they were having 8 to 10 government officials in these meetings, but it was fantastic for them because each of the member organisations were able to provide an impact statement. So they were able to offer much more tailored advice that was relevant and timely. Adrian Christie from Babington, England, was saying that UK Sport had been very supportive, and there was a general sense that the various types of sports in the similar area were coming together for a united front. But of course, the level of support has been unprecedented, and somehow we've all got to end up paying for it. So it's not an easy one to work through. In terms of communication, generally we had lots of interest around Zoom. In fact, I'm sure you've heard the expression zoomed out. I certainly have been, but it's also been a very effective way to communicate to people en masse, and not just within the UK, in a global space as well. And people saying to me that AGMs have never been so well attended, board meetings have had almost 100%. Regional events that they would have had maybe a handful of people members attend now are getting much wider engagement. And I think this is a hunger for news and information advice, so people are finding, you know, solace in this community engagement. So Microsoft Teams was also popular, but not as much. 26% say that, and a few are using WebEx. You might think that typical things to go in difficult times is memberships. Well, and that has happened because it really does depend on the sector, of course. I mean, obviously the hospitality industry, the entertainment industry has been very much affected, the events industry. My old association, the promotional merchandise sector, certainly has been affected, but what they've been able to do is to give their members a sort of 3-month payment window, because they all renew on the same month, and that does depend. So a lot of people I spoke to that had an annual renewal in January were largely unaffected by this. But if the memberships were in mid-year, then there were some challenges. Although from a positive side, there were also, people were saying to me that there's been big increases. Notably, Association of Dietitians have had an increase of probably double what they would normally have in the same time. Same to Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys, 5 to 7% increase. They're looking at a 92% retention rate at the moment, which is tremendous. In fact, the CEO was telling me that trying to get speakers to their events was normally quite challenging, but they're much more available now, and so that's meant that their events are better attended as a result. So yeah, 47% say membership was up, which is very encouraging. And obviously things like web traffic and more inbound emails, that's happening. In fact, some were saying 400% increase in web traffic. Lots of organizations putting specific COVID sections on the site, so it's almost creates a funnel of information. But what this is also doing is it's allowing organizations to reach out to a much wider community than their normal membership base, and that's very good from a membership growth. And even if people aren't necessarily signing up now, it means that it's part of that membership funnel. 82% saw an increase in social media, particularly Twitter, which is very great for news and information. And I think one of the issues and challenges that people were facing is that there was a real desire for information quickly. In some cases, it was changing by the hour, which of course creates a concern for trade associations in particular. But nevertheless, it's another reason why members need to be kept up to date. And the great thing about social media is it's very instant. Unfortunately, the events industry has definitely been impacted, and although some people that were running conferences have managed to move them online, that has had an impact on sponsorship revenue. Although some people are saying to me that some of their events are free online, but others have used a low ticket price, maybe 65, 80 and 90 pounds a ticket, which is actually, it could mean that the revenue can remain intact, because of course you haven't got the physical costs that you would have with a physical event, and like catering and all that sort of stuff. But generally, a lot of people have gone down the route of trying to create a low-cost virtual event. I guess the other question really is, have we got an appetite for virtual exhibitions? And it's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, some organisations have been definitely impacted by this, losing around £150,000 worth of revenue. I think I can see the value of online conferences, and there will be hybrids. I think that's the key word here, hybrids, so there's a mixture of the two together. But again, my old association was telling me that they're going to be running an event in September, which will mean some of the suppliers will be able to present themselves from the factory floor or from the showroom, which gives a completely different experience than they would perhaps on the show floor. Massive increase, of course, in webinars, 92% increase in that. And that's some of those have been through information, and 1,200 people registering to a webinar hasn't been unusual in some instances. So again, that's a really great vehicle for communicating information, but it's also been a great way to, as a stepping stone to, more revenue building activities like education, which has seen a 58% increase across the board. In fact, the ISM Institute of Sales Management was telling me that they've actually had to increase the number of people that are working with them. They've even had interest from further afield, like an Ethiopian brewery of all things, which quite intrigued me. This also gives a great opportunity for associations and organisations to think now about their global reach. Perhaps when they've done physical events, they've been limited by those people that can attend, because obviously they're not just, as a delegate, they're not just paying for the course itself, they're also having to pay to get there, in some cases stay overnight. But an online event means that they can study from the comfort of their own home anywhere in the world. The Chartered Institute of Marketing, which has a very big education program, and they have their own study facility at Cookham, have been talking about online invigilation for a number of years, and now been able to put it in place within a matter of weeks. Lots of organisations now are providing advice and support around social distancing within the workplace as people return, and in fact even running sort of go back to work sessions for their employees, and making sure that they're adhering to all the various guidelines. And some have actually, like the Charity Retail Association, have brought partners in to help them promote these various measures. One thing I did like was the Greeting Card Association have an annual event called Thinking of You Week, which is normally in the autumn. And one of the challenges that they face with all of the retail card shops being closed for quite a period of time is there was a huge backlog of stock of cards. And so a number of members actually donated these to care homes, and it got some really great press coverage. And a lot of these designs were able to be then put up on the Greeting Card Association website. So yeah, very good engagement. In terms of what's going to happen when everybody comes out of lockdown, well, we are already, of course, to a degree. Focus on retention and volunteer programs, probably a little bit more than recruitment, because and it's actually quite fascinating to look at how we communicate. If we are looking to recruit, there is a sense that we need to be careful in the way we communicate this. There's a real subtlety now that's required. In terms of employees, definite complete change in the way that we work in our working practices. Lots of new rules and regulations that have had to be set up for the workforce as people are working from home, and making sure that they're comfortable, making sure they've got the right seating, but also making sure that they're not working ridiculous hours, because there isn't the same demarcation as there would perhaps in the workplace. In fact, one CEO said to me that he takes 2 hours out in the middle of the day, one for his walk and one for a lunch. He starts early mind and he finishes early evening, but he wanted to almost lead by example. And normally in the past, I think there was this obviously a concern that, I don't know if I can trust all my employees to be working hard all the time. Well, I think actually all the evidence that I've got is that productivity rather is very, very high, and it's about no, you need to take a break, guys. Because we've had instances of stress and burnout and overwork, and particularly when you've got teams where half of them are furloughed and half of them are not, well, the people that are working are often taking on more responsibilities, and when they're working from home, they need to be looked after and supported. And that's why we've seen quite a lot of interest with like workplace wellness programs, organizations running quiz nights. We've seen wine tasting. In fact, one organisation was having a magician attend, which was quite fun. And of course, the other thing is working from home has meant that you need quiet space, and that's been particularly difficult when you've got homeschooling considerations as well. So we've seen a spike in these portable units. In fact, the National Association of Estate Agents was telling me that one of their members that normally sells houses with offices in was is often they're quite difficult to sell. Well, 6 of them came on the market not too long ago, and they all went within days. So it obviously proves that people are looking for different types of accommodation now. So what's the future look like? Well, it's a bit of a crystal ball for, I guess, all of us. What is important is that we have to all reforecast. Nothing is guaranteed anymore. We've got to be closer to our members, closer to our donors than ever before. We've really got to understand what's important to them. We've got to try and build confidence, and even if the media aren't necessarily helping us in that area, we've got to try and inspire people and actually support community. That's more important than ever. And it is a new norm. You know, that I don't think we're ever going to go back to the way we once were. Um, so will there be a second wave? Lots of concern suggests that there will be. And in the words of Adrian Christie, CEO of Badminton England, who said to me, well, if this really moves into a second wave that goes into the winter and spring of next year, he really worries about the state of badminton. And there's not much that keeps him awake at night, but that certainly is. So let's hope that better times prevail, and that we do learn from all of the good things, but we also support each other as a community. So that's it. If you want to know any more about what I do, go check out my podcast series on membershipworld.co.uk or contact me through the hub. So thank you very much for listening.